Hello, I'm Bret and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Reverend Dr. Jeff Utter. Dr. Utter is the pastor of Bixby Knolls Christian Church in Long Beach, California, and the Christian chaplain at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Westwood, California. Reverend Jeff Utter has many years of experience as United Church of Christ minister and as a pastor with the Disciples of Christ. He's been a missionary and served as a prison minister. Dr. Utter has a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Harvard College, a Master of Divinity degree from Harvard Divinity School, and a PhD from Columbia University. Jeff is originally from Massachusetts and has lived in Pasadena for the past 28 years. He's also been married for 28 years. He has 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Dr. Jeff Utter, welcome to The Defining Moment. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome you here to our studio today.
Thank you very much for asking me, Bret.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for coming. Our topic today is the role and responsibility of Christianity in interfaith cooperation. And I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your own life, which has influenced you in becoming who you are today.
The thing that comes to mind for me is a talk that I had with my pastor when I was a young teenager. He told me about having been in India and having learned about Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. And also he had worked with some of Gandhi's disciples. And the problem that was presented to him when he was in India was, how can someone be as great as Gandhi was? And remember, I'm just hearing about Gandhi for the first time as he's talking, and yet not be a Christian. Here was a man who was an adherent of an entirely different, entirely alien religion as far as we Christians in the West were concerned. And yet he had managed through methods of nonviolence to free his country from British imperial rule. And this became quite a struggle for my pastor while he was in India. You know, how, because after all, you know, isn't it, it's Christianity and Christian faith that produces the good people, the people who transform the world, and those other religions, and this is what we were taught for centuries, are pagans or heathens or living in the darkness or whatever. So how could someone like Gandhi come out of a context like that? And as he struggled with this, including asking God about it in prayer, he received a very clear answer, which was, he heard a voice which said to him, "Do you not think that I can use this child of mine? Do you not think that I can use this child of mine," referring to Gandhi. In other words, all human beings are God's children. And God certainly has the freedom as the creator of all of us to to raise up people outside the Christian fold, the Christian institution, for his purposes. And that planted a seed in me, and I became interested in Gandhi, and through my interest in Gandhi over the years, I gradually became very interested in the interfaith question in general.
Thank you so much. That's a very moving testimony. I want to thank you so much for sharing that with us. And why is it that you have chosen to dedicate so much time and energy to interfaith cooperation?
Well, you say so much time and energy. This has all been extracurricular. It's what I've done in my spare time, because there are very few paid staff positions for interfaith work in the world. As you told your audience, I'm primarily work within the church as a pastor and a chaplain and so on, but I do the interfaith work in my spare time, and I suppose you could say it's an avocation. but I also think of it as part of my calling, part of my vocation, and I absolutely love it. In fact, I've come to need it. It's almost like I need to breathe the air of interfaith. If not, I'm restless. I love my own tradition. I love my own faith, my own scriptures, my own religious community. But somehow I need more as well. And so that's why I do it.
I find that fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much. In your years of reaching out to other faiths, as you have, what have you discovered concerning the commonalities and differences of the world's religions?
The world's religions, or the great religious traditions, are all very, very complex. They have centuries of meaning, of different levels of meaning, of different rituals, different spiritual practices, modified in terms of different countries, different communities, different cultures, and so on. I guess one thing I've learned is to be very humble. And I'm not saying that I'm always true to that. Sometimes my ego can get in the way and I can become arrogant and think that I know a great deal more about other faiths than I do. In fact, I often give the impression that I know more about my own faith than I actually do. But it's not like that. They're all very complex, and there are commonalities. For example, I think that all religious faiths, in one way or another, explicitly or implicitly, believe that the world is a unity and that ultimate reality is a unity. They believe in oneness, and to the extent that the oneness of the world, the oneness of the human race is compromised in any way, that's something that needs to be changed or healed. I think that's one commonality. There is something like the golden rule that we have in the New Testament in many of the great faiths of the world. So there are ethical similarities too. But there are also great differences.
Yes.
I mean, it's not as if we're moving towards, in the interfaith movement, we think that we're moving towards a one unified religion. There are a few groups that believe that's going to happen. I personally don't think that will be so, because the differences are just too great. To give you just one example, for us for the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, these are monotheistic religions. God is very important and very central. God is the main actor in the drama of history. For the Buddhists, on the other hand, most of them would not deny the existence of God, but it's not important to them one way or the other. In other words, God, or the idea of a divinity, of a divine being, does not play a central role in Buddhism, at least in many of the strands of Buddhism. So there you have really a kind of fundamental difference.
Yeah.
And so we need to look for the commonalities and rejoice in the commonalities when we find them, but also be realistic about the differences and respect the differences, and realize that even when someone of another faith is speaking in a very different language and stating very different convictions than we ourselves speak, or the convictions that we have, that nevertheless, if we listen carefully, there probably is something that we can learn from them.
And then, is it your notion that God is the author of the world's religions?
That would be my notion, yes. because I believe that God is the author of everything, and God certainly has a positive reason, a positive purpose for the existence of each of the world's religions. We're way beyond the day when we can, as Christians, simply say, these are heathens or, pagans, lost in the darkness, whatever. We have to take a very different approach from that, an approach which includes dialogue. It doesn't mean that we need to give up the evangelizing side of the church, because that's also an essential part of the church. And I believe that too, that it's important to preach the gospel to all creatures. In fact, we're commanded to do that by our Lord Jesus Christ. But we always have to remember that God's activity, if you will, always goes so far beyond ours. And when we go to other faiths, we're not introducing God to them for the first time. I mean, they've had glimpses, they've had the presence of the Spirit of God in one way or another in their religious life. Could be very
intimate and profound for them.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you very much. What do you believe to be the role and responsibility of Christians in fostering dialogue, understanding, and cooperation with different faith expressions?
Well, I think it is incumbent upon us to enter into dialogue just as it is, hopefully, for all of the faiths. And dialogue means meeting as equals. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you talk down to your dialogue partner.
Yes.
But I think there's a particular role for Christians in this, which springs from the fact that we are the world's largest religion by a considerable amount. And we are more geographically spread out than all other religions as well. And we have more as political and economic power.
But there's also spiritual reasons as well, right? In terms of the example that Jesus Christ gave, his legacy, in a sense that he was so much focused on love and forgiveness and even loving your enemy. Aren't those characteristics kind of part of a kind of very high calling?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I wouldn't think that the other religions are the enemies of Christianity. I don't. I think we have to get beyond that. But yes, I mean, it actually goes without saying that our approach needs to be an approach of love, and that means openness and support and compassion, solidarity, all of those things. But what I was trying to get at a moment ago is that I think if you are the world's largest religion and the world's most powerful religion, that imperative of love needs to take the form of, above all else, of a kind of hospitality towards other faiths, making space for them.
As opposed to taking a heavy-handed approach toward converting people or proving that you have the right message, something like that.
Yes. I mean, as I said before, we need to state our own faith firmly and forcefully in certain contexts, but really partly just to atone for the way we've been in the past. And, you know, the Christian churches have done a great deal of damage to human beings in the course of history and to adherents of other faiths and so on. It's a very painful history to become aware of. Things
that Pope John Paul II apologized for as Pope. Right?
Yes. Partly to atone for those things, and partly just as a way of saying, look, we've got some power in the world now, and we're going to use that power to create space for you. and to give you a chance to speak and to listen carefully to what you have to say and to nurture you in a way, even though you are of a different faith than we are.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. That's very beautiful, very well said. What has surprised you most about your interfaith experiences?
I'm convinced that the Spirit of God is very present and central in the interfaith movement, and that for us Christians, it's a constant experience of humility, of being humbled. And if we resist it, being humiliated by encountering in those of other faiths the love you spoke of a moment ago, and the desire for truth, and all of these things which back in the days before the interfaith movement arose, we wanted to say that the Christianity had a monopoly on. When you actually come into contact with people of other faiths, you can't say that anymore.
And that presents a problem for those Christians who may be watching right now who haven't arrived at that awareness yet. I mean, there are millions of Christians that have not arrived at that awareness yet.
Well, that's true. That's true, but the same applies in relation to them, that those of us who have that awareness need to be open to them and to listen to them and to affirm what is valuable in what they're saying, because they too have a point to make.
A contribution to make.
A contribution to make, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. And what do you say to those Christians who only recognize Christianity as a legitimate expression of faith?
I would say have the courage to do a little bit of interfaith encounter and relating and conversation. And you know, don't, when you go into this conversation with someone of another faith, don't be constantly rehearsing in your head all of the things that you're going to say to them, you know, all of the right answers, but instead listen. Listen to them.
Kind of get to know them.
Get to know them as people. Listen to them. Ask them questions. Watch their face. See the humanity in them and in what they say. Because after all, Christ is present in them and with them too, even if they don't know it yet. And if Jesus Christ is present in every human being, and this is really what we believe when we say that he became incarnate, that God became incarnate in human nature, then we can hear Jesus speaking to us even in what those of other faiths are saying to us.
So if people have never had interfaith experience as Christians, you would encourage them to get their feet wet, to experiment with it, call up a Muslim imam or a Buddhist monk and go out for coffee. How would you suggest people get started?
Well, you and I were talking about the internet before. I mean, there's plenty of stuff on the internet. Maybe that's a relatively unthreatening or painless way to
you get yourself into less trouble that way, right?
Right.
In other words, educate yourself first about what people of other faiths believe before necessarily calling someone up on the telephone and saying, let's have coffee.
Yeah.
That would probably be the best way to proceed, right?
Or one good way to proceed, anyway.
Yeah, educate yourself a little bit. So you actually have an idea of what they believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. In what ways do you believe that Christianity would be enriched if it were to make, as a body, if it were to make a major investment as a body in doing interfaith work throughout the world?
Well, I think we would be enriched in as many different ways as there are different religions, different faiths, different cultures. different ways of understanding who God is and how God works in the world. We're not going to agree with everything that we encounter, but sometimes it's precisely in encountering things that you disagree with that you are stimulated to think about your own faith in a new way.
Now, tell us more about that. How has that happened for you? Give us some examples. Take your time.
Well, let's take the simple matter of what in the Christian tradition is called contemplative prayer. The Hindus and the Buddhists have developed the arts of meditation to a very, very high level. And those what they call meditation and what in the church tradition is called contemplative prayer are similar. But what has happened in the church, especially in the modern world with the Protestant Reformation and so on, is that the contemplative parts of Christian faith retreated more and more just into the monasteries, into the cloister. And the very little effort was made, very little attention was paid to the matter of relating directly to God on a daily basis, not in the sense of asking God for something, but just in the sense of coming into God's presence and making oneself available for God to do whatever God wants to do inside me. To let Him totally take us over and to direct our thoughts, our feelings, our images, and so on. To yield ourselves to Him completely and then, let the chips fall where they may. That sort of thing, the Hindus and the Buddhists really know a lot about that, even though they talk about it in a different way than we do. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, there were many, many very, very intelligent and sensitive and reflective Christian people who went over and became Buddhists or Hindus, left the church because they saw there something which had been neglected, very sadly neglected in the church, the Christian churches. So that's and now we're beginning to wake up and to realize, hey, the Hindus and the Buddhists, they've got some things to teach us about meditation, about spiritual practice, about working with one's consciousness in a way which is going to maximize our connection to God.
That's a perfect example. Thank you so much. In what ways could it contribute to world peace and contribute to solving some of humanity's greatest scourges, such as disease and starvation, if the religions were to work more closely together?
Well, this has begun, for example, in the Parliament of the World's Religions, and which has addressed statements of subscribed to by all the faiths to world leaders and that sort of thing. The more people in the world can see that the religions are not quarreling with one another or lording it over with one another, dismissing one another, the more they're going to sit up and pay attention and think, maybe they really have something to offer to humanity. You can understand why some people would dismiss Christianity, for example, just because Christians have fought so terribly among themselves. I mean, it's really...
Even Catholics and Protestants.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And various types of Protestants battling one another. I mean, it's very embarrassing.
Well, I appreciate I appreciate your honesty. I really do. Your candor in saying that. Like
Yeah.
that. I really do. Now, what about interfaith work, like as you know it, being incorporated into the work of the United Nations? Do you think the United Nations could stand to benefit from what interfaith work does in terms of
yes, and this also is already happening. There are various religious groups that have observer status at the United Nations, and there have been a number of interfaith events connected with or even taking place at the United Nations.
So you feel if there was more of that, it could only
Sure.
benefit
Absolutely.
the state of the world?
Yeah.
Okay, great. What message would you like to leave with Christians who are watching today, who may be considering taking up your challenge to them or your invitation to them to get their feet wet in interfaith work? What message would you like to leave with them?
Call me up.
Okay. So how can people contact you?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
do you have an email address or
sure.
a website that you'd like to give?
Sure, I can give my email address. It's Padre Jeff, PADREJEFF, one word, at charter.net.
Okay, great.
Padre Jeff at charter.net.
Excellent.
Love to hear from anyone.
Okay, fabulous. Well, Pastor Jeff, I can't thank you enough for being our guest today on The Defining Moment. It's really been an edifying experience. I really appreciate your candor, your honesty, and really sharing from your years of experience with interfaith work. I think you've really made a real contribution to our viewers today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me, Bret.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating a Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching and have a great day.